Have you ever wondered how you take in and retain information, or why certain topics just make no sense to you, while you can understand other topics exceptionally well? Or maybe you were curious of why you can read the same book multiple times, and each time your perception of it would change, despite the contents of the book staying constant, or why different people using the same study method will get vastly different results. I've hypothesized a logical way to think about it. And understanding this mental model creates multiple angles on which we can tackle our learning issues. To begin, all knowledge is derived from experience, or the deduction of an experience. This is our observation. The quality of our observation is dependent on the width of our scope, and also the context, which is a judgment of which aspect is worth going in depth for. So essentially, the scope is like the timeline of which you consider, or the number of perspectives you consider, while context is which part of it will you go in depth for, basically. And through this subjective filter, we sift out relevant information from irrelevant information. And this relevant information can change over time, basically, in a different context, in a different scope, or just a different priority in general. Then the information we deemed irrelevant may become relevant, and the new information which you have decided that was relevant would be in our working memory. Basically, you will focus on this certain part of information, and you'll move on to the next step, which is processing. And one thing to take note is that you can't just keep your knowledge in working memory. So in processing, what you are doing is actually just combining the new logic and reasoning you have just learned with prior knowledge that you have. And I call this mixture the interpretation of information. Basically, this is the reason why you can have the same piece of information and have different interpretations from someone else. The next step will be to use this knowledge and apply it to real life. At this stage, right, it's still not really in your long-term memory yet. Maybe the theoretical knowledge is, but if you don't apply it over time, because of the forgetting curve, which states that over time you will forget things, and you need to retrieve it again and again. Something that you knew beforehand will be forgotten, for example, for a test, and you need to revise. This is the whole point of revision. Or you can decrease the number of times you have to retrieve it by applying it in real world, because it's sort of interleaving, which is looking at the same piece of information from multiple angles. And application is like the best way to do it, despite it being more difficult. And another benefit of applying it almost immediately while memory is still fresh is because after you apply it, you will realize some parts of the information that you have learned is sort of wrong, or some parts need some modification, and some parts are correct, as hopefully you have some parts correct, and these parts will be like strengthened. And based on this new piece of information, you will have reiteration with either feedback from the real world experience, feedback from others, or self-feedback, which involves knowing some theory and also awareness to notice it. And because of that, you will have a new interpretation of the same piece of information. And as a result of looking at it through a different lens, basically, instead of looking at it through theory, you care about the procedural aspect of it. You will actually retain it longer. And this curve would be less steep, yeah. So essentially, you'll forget it slower. And therefore, you don't need to retrieve it as often as if you didn't apply the information. So this whole mental model is to point out where you can target. For example, how do we make information more relevant to us so that it doesn't get filtered out? Or how can we strengthen our prior knowledge? How can we link the prior knowledge? How can we make ourselves apply the information more? how can we give ourselves more context so that it makes more sense, which is linked to helping in this. How do we increase the scope? Like see a bigger view of things, timeline, or like number of perspectives, etc. There's like so many areas to target, which is where we're gonna strike, essentially. What I'm trying to say is it's a long journey from here, and I wish I can solve these problems in the next few months and share them with you all. Of course, any feedback will be appreciated, even though no one watches this channel. But anyways, peace out.